Hello, my name is Bob Palmer, coming to you from the History Center of Olmsted County, which celebrates its 100th anniversary this year. This is one of 12 conversations with local historians and members of the History Center staff. We will also take a look at events in and around Rochester the year the Historical Society formed.
To learn more about what's happening at the History Center, visit olmstedhistory.com.
Today we visit with Dr. Mark Warner, President of the Board of the History Center of Olmsted County. Then the Olmsted County Newsreader will take a look at some of the stories making news in Rochester 100 years ago this month. First, Mark, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm from Greenville, Ohio. It's a little farm town about 25 miles from Dayton, Ohio. It's the home of Annie Oakley. Matter of fact, our dairy farm was immediately adjacent to the farm where Annie Oakley grew up, and to this day we have very few squirrels or rabbits. In addition, Lowell Thomas was born there, and Norman Vincent Peale Jr., the Power of Positive Thinking author. So that's our town. After graduating from Miami University of Ohio, I went to medical school, and 3 minutes before the first day of medical school, I met my wife, who was also a first-year student at the school. And after graduating, we came to Rochester. We've raised 4 sons here, and I just recently retired after 42 years as an anesthesiologist at Mayo Clinic, as did my wife. And I enjoy working with organizations and like making them better, to be perfectly honest. And a variety of organizations. I've been fortunate to be president of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, American Board of Anesthesiology, the Anesthesia Patient Safety Foundation, the Academy of Anesthesia, a variety of organizations. And in town, president of the Rochester Airport Company, the Rochester Family Area Y, and now the History Center here. So it's a great privilege for me to have the opportunity to work with the History Center of Olmsted County.
Well, that's great. How did you become involved with the History Center? What led you into, you said you have an interest in participating in organizations, but why the History Center? What attracted you?
Well, it all comes down to one thing, and it's Paul Scanlon. Dr. Paul Scanlon was the previous president of the board of the History Center, and he caught me late one night after I was getting home, late night on call, and he asked me in a weak moment if I'd be interested in helping him. Yeah. Paul and I had worked on various projects at Mayo together, and we get along great, and he said he had a few things he'd like to accomplish, and he'd like me to help do that. Paul's a good friend, so I said yes. So that's really how I got going. It wasn't that I knew a lot about the History Center, but I did have a love of history in general. And for example, I've been a member of the Anesthesia History Association, and I'm a member of the Society of Cincinnati, which is descendants of the Revolutionary War, for example.
That's still going.
Oh, yes, it is. It's a strong organization. There are 14 chapters of that Society of Cincinnati, so one for each of the original 13 colonies, and then France. And recently we just had a big international meeting over in Paris, which was spectacular. And then actually my wife's very interested in history. She's the past president of the Wood Library Museum, which is the world's largest anesthesia museum and library for the history of anesthesiology. So a lot of history, and when Paul asked me to join the History Society, it seemed like the right thing to do.
Wonderful. What does the board president do?
I think there are a lot of people who would question what I do. The board president is really responsible for ensuring that the board is knowledgeable about the operations of the History Center and also has a thoughtful, realistic master plan to meet the primary mission of the society. That is a master plan that provides the communities of Olmsted County with an outstanding historical archive and provides Olmsted County residents and visitors with the educational programs needed to provide guidance on how the community evolves, how it did evolve, and how that will continue to evolve into the future and have a positive impact on the region, the state, and the nation in general. In general, the board president guides the evolution of the History Center by directing the board to provide our executive director with guidance and resources. And then the executive director and the board work together with those resources then to operationalize the objectives. In my experience, a board president is successful only if there's a strong, collaborative, and really collegial relationship between the board president and the executive director. And we are blessed to have Valerie Wassemer as our new executive director, and we couldn't be more pleased.
Excellent. What are the unique challenges or opportunities when it comes to your role at the History Center?
Well, I was surprised to find the History Center of Olmsted County had struggled over several decades to maintain its facilities and staff leadership. I was an outsider, had never really been involved in the society, and I really wasn't fully aware of the many transitions that occurred in the History Center's leadership over the past several decades. I was, however, aware that the HCOC, or our History Center, had financial struggles and worked hard to maintain its facilities, and especially at the time, Mayo would. In 2008, I hosted an international anesthesia meeting at Mayo Wood and had a beautiful reception there, but I was really disappointed in Mayo Wood itself, the physical shape of the facility. And I realized that there was a real problem there, and I was in a role at Mayo on the Board of Governors at Mayo where we were able to garner resources and work with the History Center to have Mayo take over ownership of Mayo Wood, and Mayo has now put in over $10 million in restoring Mayo Wood to a spectacular historic facility. But also to make sure that the public still had access to Mayo Wood at least half the days of the year, and that the History Center would provide the guided tours, etc. Of Mayo Wood. So I'm really pleased at how that turned out. As far as unique challenges, though, once I joined the board, I really began to realize the financial struggles of the organization. I think we'd gone quite a few years without having much positive financial outcome, if any. And the good news is that there are a ton of opportunities. And I'm really very confident that we can become the very best county historical society in Minnesota and provide remarkable educational programs for our Olmsted County students, residents, and visitors. To do this, we must first become strong financially with continuously positive financial outcomes annually. This will allow us to grow our archives to preserve our history, increase our educational programs, modernize and rejuvenate our facilities, and enhance our academic capabilities through grants to historians who wish to write about our amazing Olmsted County history. For example, a lot of our listeners may not be aware that Olmsted County leads all United States counties and has for several decades on patents per capita. It's a very creative county. IBM and Mayo, as well as their subsidiary companies and spin-off companies, are really creative enterprises, and we don't emphasize that enough in telling our story. There's so many opportunities that we're going to pursue to generate those resources. For example, starting in September, every third grader in the Rochester Public School District will do field trip to the History Center. And within a couple years, we hope to expand that to all 9 public schools that touch Olmsted County. In addition, every 6th grader in Olmsted County will have the opportunity to get a free family membership at the History Center of Olmsted County, as well as a free membership in the Minnesota Historical Society and the 27 different sites that they have. So it's those type of programs that offer great opportunities for us to have a better, really more important impact on this community.
That's great. How did you become personally interested in history? I know you mentioned something, but could you elaborate? The Cincinnatus Society, so was history something that it interested you or intrigued you growing up in Ohio, or?
Well, it is. Growing up on a farm right next to where Annie Oakley grew up, that was pretty interesting. But in addition, what really triggered it is I had an uncle who was one of the very first pilots to land in Guadalcanal in World War II. And he won a Navy Cross there, as well as many other honors by flying more combat missions than any other U.S. pilot during World War II. And that made him a hero in general, made him a hero to me,
Yeah.
and that triggered a lifelong interest in the history of the military. But in addition, I found I loved learning about all types of history. I love to read historical novels. I did as a kid. I still love reading historical novels. It's a great way to learn about history, but still be very personally involved because it's a fictional novel. I would love to own a time machine.
Yes.
If only I could. It doesn't matter what the topic. It could be the history of baseball or other sports, agriculture, world history. It doesn't really matter. I just love human history. I'm not so sure I'm quite as involved in prehistoric or pre-human history. I'm not a geologist or an archaeologist, but in the Homo sapiens period, human period, I'm interested in almost any type of history.
Excellent. What is the most interesting item for you at the center?
Oh, that's simple. I hadn't been to the History Museum for years and years and years until I joined the board. I come in and I take my first lap around the exhibit hall. And the thing that interests me most is we have two beautiful mastodon tusks. And you might think, why would that interest me? Well, I grew up on a dairy farm and also a beef farm. And because of that, I also love bison. My wife and I are very involved with bison and own bison. And you know how Dances with Wolves, the movie, you see herds and herds, thousands and thousands of bisons out in the prairie. It just dawns on me that in the prehistoric times, and even in human times, maybe 6,000, 7,000 years ago, in this county, we had herds of mastodon roaming this county. One of the tusks was dug up just 30 feet from the northwest corner of this facility. So we had mastodon all over this area. Wouldn't it be amazing to go back in a time machine and see herds of mastodon roaming this area, and eventually then over thousands of years replaced with bison, and then eventually farming, cattle, and everything else. So that's what really got me my first interesting moment here at the History Center.
Well, it certainly ties into my next question. If you could live in another era in your time machine in Olmsted County history, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a really tough one. If you're telling me I could live anywhere in the world in some era, I would tell you it'd be the Renaissance. It's probably a Western-oriented approach, but the Renaissance, whether it was in Italy or Europe or even the Renaissance as it affected Asia and other areas, was fascinating. It was such a period of rapid evolution. And it was really the period where you went from a few feudal leaders and a lot of extreme poverty to a period of the middle class, and then the upper educated class, and then the few at the high end, which is kind of a reflection of where we are today. We've still got that thing. And actually right now, it's not a bad time to be living. There's less people being killed in the world every year now. There's less hunger, extreme poverty than there ever was. But that all started with the Renaissance. And I think it would have been fascinating to go back and meet Leonardo da Vinci, see Michelangelo, learn all the things that everyone in that period contributed to. Here in Olmsted County, I'd like gone back to probably 2,000 years BC and seen what the humans, our predecessors and Native Americans, lived like here. I live on a farm about 3 miles south of here, and we did some drilling recently. They were putting in a natural gas pipeline through our farm, and we were able to pull out all types of artifacts, Indian arrowheads, axes, all types of things. We actually bundled it all together and sent it up to the Minnesota Historical Society at the time. that was right before I became involved in the History Center here, or I would have sent it here. I think they still have it in their collection out there. But that triggered in my mind. On our own farm, I'd like to know, what was that like 2000 BC? What would it have been like? Where did they live? Did they live in the woods where the stream was? Did they live out in the prairie? Were they chasing mastodon or not? What were they doing? Yeah. So all kind of fascinating things.
That is great. Thank you, Mark. That was very interesting.
If you'd like to help the History Center and its mission, please consider making a contribution by going to olmstedhistory.com/donate.
Now let's look at what was making news in Olmsted County in 1926 with the Olmsted County News Reader. Writing in the Rochester Post and Bulletin on February 4th, Ellen Rowland advised her readers in her column, Meditations, to, quote, never take a man seriously as long as he flatters you. Wait until he begins to moralize about your rouge, your haircut, or the length of your skirts, end quote. An American Legion committee will look into the feasibility of establishing a public golf course in Rochester. The projected municipal course would provide a public playground for children, tennis courts, and a swimming pool. Miss Frances Joslin won first prize and a check of $25 at a dress-up party Tuesday at the ice rink, where scores of young women appeared in costume. The Olmsted County Historical Society has been formed. Members of the society originally met 2 weeks prior, but officially organized on February 5th, according to a news story in the Rochester Post and Bulletin. The group elected Burton W. Eaton president. Vice president is Mrs. G.E. Benedict. Officers include 6 directors. At the meeting, 2 early histories of the county became its first of historical data to be given into the possession of the society. These included the first history of Olmsted County, written by M.W. Mitchell, a former Rochester newspaperman. The book, which is out of print at present time, it was presented by Miss Rice and her 2 brothers. A second history was presented by Gus Schmitz, proprietor of the printing establishment. It was written by the late Joseph A. Leonard and is one of the most authentic histories of the county ever published. The 2 with a third published by a non-resident are the only ones ever written in this county. Those attending either of the 2 early meetings will be deemed charter members. Annual membership fees will be $1 per year. Rochester women, led by Mrs. George Allen and Miss Margaret Hickman, argued for the reestablishment of capital punishment for murders in Minnesota at the Midwinter Conference of the Minnesota Federation of Women's Clubs at the state capitol in St. Paul. Although the organization took no official action on the recommendation by Minneapolis attorney Charles R. Fowler to urge the legislature in 1927 to bring back the death penalty, several members spoke in favor of the idea. Former Catco Mayor Mrs. Ida Sparks Clark said, if we had capital punishment, we would have far less crime in Minnesota than we have at this present time with our sentimentality towards criminals. Mrs. Clark also spoke in favor of bringing back public whipping posts to deal with criminals who attack women. The 6th grade girls YMCA Club of Lincoln and Central Schools will have a sleigh ride followed by a supper at the Red House. Former Rochester resident Noel Wynn has joined the expedition attempting to fly over the North Pole. Noel, a pilot for William Yunker while in Rochester, the research expedition by the All-American University seeks to find the unknown continent. Rochester appears to have avoided a scarlet fever epidemic. No new cases of scarlet fever have been reported to the health department during the last 10 days. The epidemic is still raging elsewhere across the state. Dr. D.C. Lockhead says that we must expect to have more in Rochester before spring. The doctor urged that children be vaccinated with Dr. Larson's scarlet fever toxin. Dr. Lockhead and school nurse Miss Charlotte Hanson will be at the Lincoln School on Tuesday and Thursday to conduct the vaccinations. Parents are reminded to send signed permission slips with each child. You can beat the expected 50% increase in the price of Overland sedans at Service Motor Company on 4th Street Southwest, where you can still buy an Overland sedan for $595. The Lawler Theater will have continuous programs from 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. starting Thursday. In addition to the regular show, the Lawler Quartet will perform. Rochester Junior College basketball coach Singley has been struck ill on the eve of a match with Hibbing. Coach Singley is confined to his home on the verge of pneumonia and is believed to be unable to make the trip to Hibbing. The players, however, who have been on the sick list in the semifinal games before the end of the race in the southern half, are in condition, and light workouts this week have kept them on edge for the clash Monday night. Back copies of Rochester newspapers can be found at the History Center of Olmsted County, celebrating 100 years through 2026. Join us again in March when we learn of Dr. Charles Mayo's talk on how long man can expect to live.